What's up, guys? My name is Marcus Huskins, and thank you for joining me. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please go ahead and do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and I appreciate your support. In this video, I'm actually preparing some pre-production sessions for a session I have later on this week to do some percussion tracking, and I thought I would just roll a video on this and hope that I don't mess anything up. So we're just going to be running this in real time, and I wanted to share my workflow with you. This is something that I've actually made a lot of mistakes on in the past, and I've got it to a point where I'm pretty happy with it. So let's take a look at our preview window open here. We have something that's been sent over to me by the client. Now, regardless of what genre of music you're working on, you are most likely, if you're hired to produce a record and you're in charge of putting together the sessions, you are going to be sent something by a client or an artist or a friend or whoever it is that you're working with. And it's going to be something in terms of chord changes and some basic type of arrangement. In addition to that, you will most likely also receive a scratch track. This could be something that's recorded to a grid, or this could be something that's completely free time recorded on a voice memo of an iPhone or something like that. So let's take a look at how I would go about setting this up. Well, first of all, I've got some information. This client works in notation software, and they've chosen to send me basically a lead sheet, a very basic lead sheet with the A section, the B section. It gives me the chord changes, and it also gives me the key of the song, time signature, BPM, all of that information. So I've entered any relevant information already. We're at B minor. We are at 4/4 in terms of our timing. We're at 113 BPM. My next step is I'm going to bring in my marker, arranger, and the chord tracks, and we're going to start filling in this information. Now, I've also got some audio prints that were sent out. We'll bring those in a moment, but to start off with, let's take a look at this lead sheet. So we've got an A section and we've got a B section. Let's take a look at the B section first. We've got 8 bars and we've got some chord changes here. E minor, B minor, E minor, B minor, E minor, B minor, E minor, F sharp major. Now for the A section, we've got B minor, A, E minor, F sharp, but notice these 2 little dots over here, which means that this 4-bar section repeats once. So A, even though it's seen as 4 bars here, the full amount of A with the repeat is actually 8 bars. So technically we have like an A and an A repeat. And this is most likely going to come into play with the melody, where the first 4 bars of the melody will be one thing, and then the second 4 bars of the melody will be something else that leads us into the B section. This will make a little bit more sense when we bring in the scratch tracks. But to start off with, I'm going to come into Studio One, and let's double click to maximize our screen real estate. I've got my arrow tool selected. I will hold down Command or Control, and I'm able, let's make sure our snapping's on. I am able to drag out a section. So we want 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we need 5, 6, 7, 8. And then our B section, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, for now, I'm going to rename this according to what the client has given me, which should be A and B. Okay, so now we have our A section and our B section. Now, one thing I want to make note of is that, like I said, we have this repeat to take a look at. It's going to come into the equation here. But before we actually look at that, let's open up, let's bring in the audio files into our actual Studio One song. I've already imported these. Let's bring them in. I'm going to drag and drop them at bar 21. Okay, so my first step is I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to name them scratch tracks. Okay, and my second step before I do any editing is let's right click, and under event we can add an arranger section from the selection, and then we could name these, for example, unedited tracks. And I'm also going to give this a color, something like maybe like a bright yellow or something like that. Now I want to kind of have a backup in case I mess something up. So I'm going to right click this and I'm going to copy this to a new scratchpad. So scratchpad 1 now has just these tracks in terms of, that's it. It doesn't have the A or the B. It just has this if I ever need to get back to it. But let's hide that for now. Okay, so let's take a look at these sections. Really quickly, I can tell you, because this is the 7th or 8th song that I've worked on with this client, that these are done to an actual tempo and they're edited on a bar. So you can tell that they're residing on a bar boundary. They might not be perfectly in time, but they're on a grid at the proper BPM, which will allow me to kind of fast track any editings that I'm doing. So I'm going to snip out the sections in here, and they're also separated by at least 2 bars. So I know that these are the different sections. My guess is that this is A and this is B. Now, I also know from communicating with this client, let's delete this for now. I also know that I have a melody and lead in terms of a mix down in one of these tracks. Let's Alt or Option Solo to select this. I'm going to turn off my click for now. Okay, and then I have just the chords and just the lead or the melody. So let's rename these. I'm going to rename this chords. This is just for me visually, so that I can make a little bit more sense of everything, and it will help if I spelt melody right. I'm going to drag the scratch track that has both of them down to the bottom, and then I want to mute both of these because I don't need to double up. I just have the chords and I have the melody each on their own track. That'll be good enough for me. If we listen to this though, let's take a look at the melody. I can see that these chords are the same, and then I see the melody. If we solo this, okay, and if I listen to bar 5, so the 4 bars, the ending 4 bars of this A section are different than the first 4 bars. So it's just exactly like I had assumed previously. So what I want to do in that case is let's zoom out a little bit. So let's just drag this in here, and we'll drag this in here. And now essentially we've brought in the audio and we've mapped it out to the right part. But if I wanted to be really OCD about this, I would select my blade tool and split this. And now this would really become kind of like we could call it a second repeat, because the A second repeat actually has a different melody tied to it. If we wanted to be 100% accurate, then that's what we do. Now really, really quickly, I want to open up another song because like I mentioned, this is a best case scenario, and this doesn't always happen, and probably for the first 2 or 3 or 4 songs that you're doing pre-production for, this will not be the case. My guess would be that, let's go to another song. This is, I think it's the first song that I did pre-production on. Notice down at the end of my timeline here, we have these 2 audio events with manual tempo mapping. I actually tempo mapped both of these sections. I snipped the audio and I tempo mapped them and then bounced them before I dragged them over into the sections. You can see the time stretching icon. So if you listen to these, and let's bring in our click track. This is literally an iPhone mic or something like that. And it's been played without a click, and then I've tempo mapped the downbeats of every bar. And then we have the different section. Now once that was done, basically I bounced this, and what that means is these files have the map in, and then I can drag these files in place over here. So for example, the B section, if I drag this B into place, watch what happens. That little icon indicates that it is time stretching. So it's taken all of this and it's done all the math, and it's now playing back at a static 85 BPM. Now this would be the starting point before we go to the next part of my tracking or my workflow, where I'm actually tracking the instrument. So I have the tracks all laid out here, but at this point I've actually recorded some percussion. Now I've also got some other stuff going on here, which is what I want to talk about next. So let's go back to the song that we're working on. Okay, so now we've got our A, and we've got our A second repeat, and we've got our B section. Okay, so what I want to do, let's close my pool down. At this point, now that the audio is in here, my first step would be, if this wasn't perfect, I would actually quantize these, use bend markers and the audio bend tool to get these guys in place. And in the cases of if it's percussion or stuff that's separated, I might use a slicing workflow and slip as opposed to time stretching the actual audio. But the great thing here is that I have the basic chords in place. But if I listen to any one of these chords, so for example, if I turn this off, I can hear the basic groove that the client had in mind. So this is why it's a good thing to have these in place, even if I don't end up using them. Because what I want to do is I want to bring in the chord track now, and then I will arrange things out a little bit further. So the number one mistake that I made when I first started doing this using the arranger track is essentially I would block out the arranger sections all first, and then I would bring in the audio and I'd be Alt or Option dragging it, and then I'd have to do all the chords, and I'd realize, oh, I should have done that first. So what I do now is I lay in the minimal amount of information that I can, and then once I'm happy with that, I will go in and lay the chords. So if we take a look at these chord sections, we have B minor, A, E minor, and F sharp major. What I can do now is go to the chord track, and I hold down the Command key and I can basically draw in these different chords. Now, once you've drawn in these chords, you can use like Alt or Option drag if you wanted to copy them, or you could use D to duplicate, or you could do like a Command C and then a Command V type workflow, whatever you want. And also we can open this up and I can navigate to the previous and next with the GUI or the arrow keys on my keyboard. So there's a number of different ways that we can lay out the chord track information. But for now, let's go B minor. This one is going to be, where are we here? It's going to be A. And then I'll probably just click the D to duplicate again. I will go E minor, D to duplicate again, and this will be F sharp. Now this is going to be the exact same, so I'll select these, I'll highlight them, and I'll move them across. Now moving on to the B section, we've got E minor, B minor, E minor, B minor, E minor, B minor. Okay, so I only need to do 2. Let's go with E minor, and then I will duplicate. This one will be B minor. I'll select these, and I'll duplicate twice. Let's duplicate once more, and then I just have to change this last one to an F sharp major. Okay, I'm going to change the color so these pop out a little bit more in terms of the different, being a different chord section. So now I have my A second repeat, and my B section. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I need to start taking a look at this area over here. Essentially, we're ready to start laying this out. If I was doing this and I wasn't worried about my runtime, I would quantize this audio and get it as in time as possible. But for now, in order to save time, let's omit that step. So we have A once before the melody starts. Okay, now keep in mind, our A section, it's 4 bars with a repeat. We have like an A and then the A with the second repeat. So for this one here, I'm going to Alt or Option drag, and I'm going to insert this in front of this one. So now I've inserted another A, and it's given me a duplicate time signature, so let's remove that. This one here, let's move the start over just for now. And then what I want to do is I'm going to remove these all together, and I kind of see this as being an intro, so let's lasso select these. Let's change all the color, and also in the actual name, let's change this to intro, and then I can say -A, and I can see visually that that's a completely different color, but I can still see the same chord changes. Now, while we're on the topic of the chord track, one thing that I do, and this is really helpful, sometimes I don't have scratch tracks at all, and somebody will just literally send me A, B, C, A, B, C, and they'll give me that, and then they'll give me the chords. But what I can do with the chord track is you select the chord track, and we can choose the chord preview instrument. I'm going to bring in my input controls, and I'm going to set this to about -15 based on where I gain stage. That usually works for me. And then I want to set this to actual play the track. So now what happens is, regardless of whether I have scratch tracks or not, I have a harmonic roadmap. And this to me is so useful. I'm going to drop down the octave though, so it's 1 octave lower. Perfect. Now, before we move along and start arranging, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to add an arranger block, and this one I'm going to call pre-count. You don't have to do this. This is just something that I do. And I'm going to make this, let's make it something super bright. Maybe we'll do orange, something like that. And now this pre-count, I actually want this pre-count to happen before everything else. So I'm going to click and drag this over here. As long as the inspector's open, you have a vertical kind of arrangement section versus a horizontal. So now I have a pre-count. The pre-count is useful because sometimes what you're recording has a pickup, and I want it to happen before here. Now this is kind of changed my bars. If I want this to start at bar 1, I can go to song and song setup, and then we can add a bar offset. So we'll go to -1, apply, and OK. So now our bar starts at 0, but bar 1, which is where our song start is, actually happens at bar 1. Okay, we'll do our markers later. We won't worry about anything else. Let's just move along and start arranging this track. Actually, first things first, let me close the inspector, and let me double click to resize my Studio One screen. And now this is just basic math. So the thing to keep in mind is our A's over here, they're indicated as 1 4-bar passage, and the B's would be equal to 8 bars. So even though A is technically 8 bars, the way that I'm reading this is that this 1A would be just 4 bars. But the thing that I need to take into account is that our A sections have an A and a second repeat, and the melody that's associated with bars, the back end 5 through 9 is different than 1 through 4. So when we're doing our A's for 4 times, we would be repeating both of these sections. So I'm going to select both of these. We're going to duplicate. So we got A 4 times B. So we have that. Then we have A 4 times B again. Okay, so we'll highlight all of these and we'll duplicate that. And now we're looking at A 8 times and B 2 times. So let me go like this. I'm going to go, there's my A 4 times B and my A 4 times B. Now if I take this B, I'm going to hold down Alt or Option to make a copy and place it here. And then this one, I can just delete this range and it'll shuffle delete everything back. So we have this is going to be, and this is indicating here solo. So Shift Y, and I can insert a marker and name it at the same time. So I'm going to say guitar solo. So just we have a marker in place. So I've got A 8 times and B 2 times. Then I've got A 4 times B. So we can grab 4 A's. Whoops, I'm going to grab 1, 2, 3, 4 A's and a B. And in this case, I'm going to do Command C. And then I can just navigate here. That's A 4 times B. And then now we have A 8 times and B 4 times. So let's duplicate this again. And this one, we will duplicate this A 8 times and B 4 times. And then I'm going to duplicate this 3 times. And let's see where we're sitting in terms of our final runtime. Okay, so it's quite a long song. It's not really uncommon with Roomba that you have long instrumental songs because they have long solos and stuff like that. But I just want to make sure that I've got everything right. So let me open up my preview again. And so let's have a quick look. We have A once before the melody starts. So that is this section for us over here. Then we have A 4 times B, A 4 times B. So A 4 times B, A 4 times B. And then we go to the guitar solo, which is A 8 times B 2 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2 B's. Okay, perfect. Now we have A 4 times B and A 8 times B 4 times. A 4 times B, and then A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then B 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, perfect. So now at this point, Shift double click and Option or Alt Y to set my start and end points. This, I will rename this to pre-count. And then let me go to this one. And this will be intro. And I'm going to put in brackets A little bit hard to see unless you zoom in fully over here because they're overlapping a little bit. But we've got some basic breakup here that we have. And then this I could say like solo ends, however, whatever type of markers that I would want to add here. But this is the basics of how I've laid out this song. And basically now, even if I wasn't listening to, for example, my chords and I just had my melody, so this is a key example of why I would actually go in there and edit things ahead of time. But we have our A section here, which has a different melody on the first versus if I play from here. So we have A and A second repeat. And if I really wanted to be kind of OCD about this, I could go to every single second repeat and I could probably even make them a different color of blue if I wanted to. Make sure that they're all selected. I'm holding Shift, by the way, to multi-select this. It's not holding Command like you would think it is. That will actually bring you to a paint tool, and you'll end up messing up your chord selection. But I could make these just a different shade of blue. So, for example, like that. I don't know if that's going to show up at all. Yeah, a little bit maybe. Arguably makes it more clear or not, doesn't really matter. But this is the basics of what I would do in setting up my pre-production. And then from here, I have the ability to take a screenshot of this, send it to the client. I will actually, in some cases, use the chord track as kind of my scratch chords. And the other thing to think about with the chord track, let's select this for a quick moment. We'll go to the inspector. Let's say that I don't want to have the default chord sound, which is just a preset that's been loaded in MyTie. If, for example, I wanted to come into the browser and go into the instruments and I wanted to load, I could load, for example, piano ballad. That's a pretty nice sounding piano. And then instead of the chord track triggering chord preview, I could select chords and then I could choose, where is it here? Presence. And now instead of using chord preview, it's going to use the piano track. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go down about -15. That's just where things usually end up with where I like to do my gain staging. Now instead of the chord track sounds, we are going to hear basic piano. And then I would bring in my click track. Okay, and then I always leave my click around -12 or -15, and I gain stage everything starting from that as a good starting point. So this is it. This song is now essentially ready for pre-production. It's ready for a tracking session. As long as I got a green light from the client, I would essentially render a mix with this and maybe take a screenshot and then ask them to sign off on the arrangement. And once they're happy with the arrangement, at that point, I could start replacing elements with acoustic guitars, bass guitars, percussion, drum kit, loops, anything, and I could actually start building out this track. So that is the workflow that I use when preparing my pre-production sessions for tracking and beginning a song. This gets worked until I'm completely happy with it, and then I will either use File, Save to New Folder, or I will create a brand new session and a different drive potentially, and I will use Import Song Data, and I will import everything I need from this session into my new session so that I can start the recording process and start laying down the foundation and the tracks to get these songs to come to life. So anyways, that's all the time I have available for today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'll do my absolute best to get back to you. And as always, we will catch you in the next video. Cheers.